For those of you who don't know who Nick Nolte is, forget about Power BI and welcome to the wonderful world of Nick Nolte. Nick brought us such fantastic movies as The Thin Red Line. You may be thinking, I don't remember a handsome fellow like this appearing in that movie. Well, here he is, Mr. Nolte. There's his picture right there. Another movie he was in that I really liked, The Good Thief. If you haven't seen that, that's also a great movie. He stars in it. Great soundtrack too. I think Leonard Cohen had a bunch of tracks on it. But my personal favorite, if you're into dramas, it's an older one, but it's Affliction. He won Best Actor, Oscar in that year for that movie. And James Coburn played his father in that movie, won Best Supporting Actor. I'm not sure that's ever happened before, where in a movie the father-son actually won 2 Oscars together in those kind of roles. So I thought it was pretty interesting. But it's one of my favorite movies. I don't think it's on Netflix, so you may have to go home and get it on iTunes or Google Play. Anyway, if you're interested in seeing a great drama with a great actor, Nick Nolte, go home and rent it tonight. I think it's really good. And you'll get your value out of the video just by going home and seeing that amazing movie. Anyway, yes, I do love Nick Nolte. I think he's a great actor, but we all have our bad days, as you can see in this picture here. So Mr. Nolte is going to help us illustrate a point about data today. So data, rarely when you bring it in, I think, is in a perfect shape or condition so that you're ready to use it. So we often have to transform our data. So we take our data for something that's kind of old and decrepit and ugly looking, and we transform it into something that's fantastic and pretty that we can work with, like our friend Leo here. So to show you how that the different transformation options in Power BI, some of the videos I've already shown some of this, but I'll go through them quickly just so that you have this reference video to know what all these options are. Donc vous allez voir toutes les options pour la transformation des données dans la vidéo ici. So I'll go through them quickly, but you've probably seen most of them already. I'm just going to use a simple data set. Je vais utiliser un set de données qui est très simple. I loaded a PE table from Excel, which is from RTMS. You can use any data set. Vous pouvez utiliser n'importe quel set de données. You have the same options available to you. So you remember, when you do data transformation, you always want to be in the Edit Queries view. So when you open up your file, you click Edit Queries, and that's where you do all of your data transformation. So you remember, when you click on that, it always opens up a separate window, and then you have all your options up at the top here. So the options are kind of spread between the Home ribbon, the Transform ribbon, and the Add Column ribbon. Donc je vais cliquer sur quelques options ici, and I'll do it very quickly just to give you an idea of what each of them do. If you hover your mouse over an option, ça va vous donner une explication de qu'est-ce que l'action va faire. So I find it pretty helpful. Anyway, we'll just go through them quickly. I haven't clicked on all of them in a while, so sorry if I click on one and I don't know what it does. But usually it's pretty self-explanatory. So the first option I'll go through here is choose columns. So if you have a data set and you only want certain columns, remember, a best practice is to reduce your data set only to the columns you need. Donc si vous cliquez sur choose columns, ça va vous donner l'option pour supprimer les colonnes que vous n'avez pas besoin. So you can click on that and it gives you a list of all columns, and you can unselect the ones that you don't want. Next example, keep rows or remove rows. If you click on those, ça va vous donner l'option pour supprimer quelques rangées ou pour juste garder certaines rangées, so to keep certain records or to remove certain records. So let's say I just wanted to keep the top 5 rows. You can click on this and it gives you, see, keep top rows, keep bottom rows. And if you click on that, it actually gives you an option pour que vous puissiez entrer le numéro de rangées que vous voulez garder. So enter the number of rows that you want to keep. So if I entered 5 here, it would keep the top 5 rows. So as soon as I click OK, you'll see my data set be reduced to top 5 rows. And everything that you do remember, so vous montrez les étapes ici, you see the steps here. So I just see kept first rows. It's actually very descriptive. And if you click the gear here, you can go back and edit that. But I don't want that. I'm just going to click the X. I just wanted to show you that. Remove rows, it's the same thing. You can sort your data A to Z, Z to A. We don't need to go through that. Split column. This is useful if you have a column with a few pieces of information that you want to split out. Let's say right here, for example, the PAA ID You have 4.2.0 in the first one, for example. Let's say you wanted to split out the 4.2 into one column and the 0 in another column. You can use this option here to split that out. So you can split it out by delimiter or number of characters. So you remember delimiter is if you want to split after you hit a certain character, so like a period or a comma, it'll split the column once it hits that. But if instead you just want to specify the number of characters, like split after 4 characters, you can do that. So if I click this, I'm just going to say split after 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say after 3 characters, split it. And it gives you a few nice options. I just want it split once because I want one column with 4.2.0 and another column with 0. Example doesn't make much sense, but it gives you an idea of what it does. Donc, si je vais cliquer ici sur OK, ça va me donner 2 colonnes, une colonne avec les premiers 3 characters, and another column with the remaining characters here. So if I click OK, that's what it's going to do. See, I have 4.2, and puis j'ai une autre colonne ici, seulement avec le 0. So I don't want that again. I'm going to click the X to get rid of that. It was just to show you. Split column, get rid of that here. So now, a lot of you probably have not used this, but it's a very useful function, group by. So if you have data that is has summary information, this really isn't a good example here to show you. Actually, maybe I could show you. Anyway, a good example would be is if you have, let's say, a table of invoices, and you have line items for an invoice. So you have one invoice with a certain ID, and you have like 10 line items. So you can group by invoice ID. So you roll up those 10 items into one line, and it just gives you a subtotal for the amount for that invoice ID. So it's a way to subtotal your data set if you want to reduce your data sets to something that's more summarized, more manageable. It won't work very well here because I don't really have much to summarize. Maybe I could do a count, for example, on how many rows roll up to 2.2 and all the others. So if you click on it, group by, it asks you which column would you like to group by. So let's say I want to group by PAA. Donc je vais grouper les données par PAA, et puis je vais faire une count des rangées. So down here you can enter the new column name, so it's going to add another column. I'm going to say count of records. And then you select which operation you would like it to perform, which summary operation. So you can do sum. It doesn't make sense in this case because it's not an amount. I just want to count rows. And then you can basically just click OK, and it'll go through. So now it gives me a summary. So it summarizes the data. It gives me a count of how many rows I have per PAA. So this example isn't great in my data set, but you can see that if you had invoice detail or budget or spending, and you had a bunch of records that you just wanted to roll up into like one record per PE or one record per invoice number, something like that would be very useful. Vous pouvez aussi changer le type de colonne. Donc up here, data type any. Vous pouvez changer le type de colonne, numéro, and date, text, binary. So it gives you all kinds of options up there. Si vous avez des données et ça ne vous donne pas les titres ou the headers up here automatically, sometimes that's the case. You bring in data from Excel and your first row is the header, but it doesn't pick it up as the header. You can click that here and it'll transform your first row into titles or headers if it didn't do it properly. Replace values, I find this very useful. Si vous avez quelque chose dans vos données que vous voulez trouver et remplacer avec une autre action. So in Excel, that's Control H, find and replace values. So just to give you an example of how it works, let's say here, I want to replace any mention of PAA 1.2.0 with, I don't know, 1.3.0. I click on the column that I want to replace values on. I click Replace Values. I say Find 1.2.0 and replace with 1.3.0. And it goes through and it does that operation for you. So anytime there was 1.2.0, you'll notice it's gone and it replaced it with 1.3.0. So I'm going to remove that because I don't want that, just to show you. So merge queries and append queries, those are very important. I kind of touched on them briefly in another video, I think, or maybe one of our sessions. Je vais faire un autre vidéo that goes into a lot of detail in these because they're very important. But basically merge queries lets you bring in information from another table or another source. Here I only have one source, so I won't use that. And append queries is if you have multiple data sources or tables that are formatted the same, and you want to group them, vous voulez les grouper dans une table, so you want to bring them into one table. So those are two very important functions we'll go over in a future video. So those are the buttons on the Home tab. You'll notice that some of the same buttons are in Transform and Add Column. Microsoft just did that so that people aren't always clicking around trying to find things. Usually if you're on one of the tabs, you'll find what you want. So if I go to the Transform tab up here, we had some of the same options that we had in the previous tab, like up here. I think you have choose columns, use first rows as headers, some of that same kind of stuff, group by. Transpose, I won't actually click on this, but it's the same option in Excel if you want to make your rows columns and your columns rows. It kind of flips the data. Reverse rows, if you hold your mouse over it, it does exactly what it says. So the rows that are at the bottom now go at the top. It's just kind of like a formatting thing. Some of the actions just return a result, like count rows. Si je vais cliquer ici, ça va me donner un numéro qui est c'est comme combien de rangées j'ai dans mes données. So how many records do I have in my data set? So if I click on that, it says 2583. So I have 2,583 records in my data set. So it just does a simple count. So I'm going to click off of that. Same kind of options, replace values. See, these are some of the options we already had in the Home tab. They're up here. If you're bringing in data and coming from Excel, you're not sure about the data type. So the data type for each column is up here. See ABC123, so I think this is a string. If it's a number, it would just be 123. But if you click Detect Data Type, Power BI will go and try to determine what the optimal data type for that is. So if I highlight this column and I click it, I don't know if it'll pick up something different, but maybe it'll transform it to a date, and it did, and this is a date. So it's pretty handy if the data that you're bringing in from Excel or wherever else isn't formatted in the best way. So fill, I can't show you, oh, maybe I can. Yes, I can show you how it would work here. So what fill does is if you have any records with null or no value, and you want them to inherit the value of the row either above or below them, that's what that option is. So if I go down in my data here, I see this record right here. It has a null value for parent ID. So you'd never want to do this for this data set because it doesn't make sense. But just to show you how it works, let's say I want anytime there's a null to be replaced with this number up here. There's a function in Excel that does this. It's kind of hard to get to, but it's the same kind of thing. So all I have to do is I click in the field that I want to do that in, and I click fill, and I want to fill down. So if I say fill down, it means once I hit a null, it's going to fill it down with the value from the top. Ça va donner la valeur qui est en haut, et ça va la remplacer ici. Donc, au lieu de null, j'aurai 6, 7, 3, 8. So if I click fill down, it should do exactly that. Yeah, and that's what it did. Sorry, it bumped around when I did that, but you get the idea. It bumped back up. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to click the X. Pivot column, we won't do that here because it doesn't make sense with the data we have here, but in another video when I was talking about FRS, that's important if you want to format the data, so you can use it like you would just an FRS report, like in Excel, and then unpivot removes that action. Move just moves the columns around in order. Convert to list, that's kind of useful. Basically, this gives you a list of all unique values for the column that you click on. Like, let's say that I just want a list of all the unique PEs in my data set. Je veux seulement une liste de tous les éléments de programme uniques dans mon données. So I click on the field, and then I click Convert to List, and it's going to give me a list of all unique values of PEs in my data set. So that could be very useful if you have a data set and you want to quickly analyze what are the different values for a particular column. So that's why that one's useful, Convert to List. Split column, we already did that one. It was in the other tab. You can split by delimiter, a number of characters. Remember, we split out the PAA into two columns. Extract is kind of useful. It lets you extract information from any cell that you're in. So let's say that I'm here in the active start date, and I want to extract the length, for example. So that will give me the length of characters for each cell. So if I click on that, ça va me donner combien de caractères qui sont dans chaque cell. Donc, it's all the same because they're dates, so it's 10 cells in each one. Don't need that. But you can extract other things. Gives you some other options. Like you can say, first characters, give me the first 4 characters. So count, give me the first 4 characters. And then it will give me the first 4 characters, 2013, right there. So it's kind of like the left or the right function also in Excel, but much easier to use because you do not have to go in and write the formula. So you have all kinds of options here. So if you're ever looking at extracting a certain piece of information from a cell, use this. It's pretty useful. Other things here, statistics. I won't go into this really much, but if you're interested in getting summary statistics or mathematical calculations, or, let's go back to high school, trigonometry, I have no idea what that would give. But statistics, if I click on that, let's say I wanted the median for the reference table level ID, which I clicked on. If I click on that, it's going to give me the median. So the median is 5. So if you're interested in summary statistics, that's where you would get that in the transform ribbon. You'll notice as I undo the actions, it kind of kicks me back to the home ribbon sometimes. That's kind of annoying. I think they'll fix that in a future update. So if you notice why it's bouncing back and forth, that's why. I think it's a bug. I think it'll be fixed. So that's pretty much it for data transformation here. If I click on the Add Column ribbon, ça va me donne des options pour additionner une colonne. Je peux ajouter une colonne conditionnelle, je peux ajouter une colonne custom. J'ai quelques autres options qui sont semblables à ce que j'ai vu dans l'onglet pour transformation. So I won't go over these because they're the same options basically that were in the transform ribbon. But you do have these options. So I went through this in the group. I won't go through it in detail here because it'll take a bit of time, but column from example. That's an easy way to create a column from a bunch of different columns. If you click on it, you can basically type out a sentence that you would like, and it will include different data points. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to quickly just show you that to you. So let's say that I want to create a new column that combines the PE and the reference table level ID. Bad example maybe, but just to show you. So you can either click the button up here or you can right click on any column and say add column from example. So then the first thing that you have to do is select the columns you want the data to include it from. So I want the PE and I want the reference table level ID. So those two I'll select. And then you just start typing like English. It's pretty cool. So PE, and then you reference the data when you want to reference it, and you type in what it is right here. So 101 has a reference level of 5. So if I did that correctly, see I reference one of the data points here, 101. Power BI will say, oh, there's 101. And I referenced another here. Power BI should say, oh, there's one right there. I don't have to say the titles or anything. It should just pick it up. So if I press enter, what it does is it adds a new column that does that logic for every single record in my data set. So then it writes the same sentence, but it picks up the applicable PE and reference table level from each row, as you can see it does here. So that's really cool. It's an easy way to combine 2 or more columns into one column, especially if you want a sentence around it, so it's easier for the user to understand. So I'm just going to remove what I did there. But it's an interesting feature. Custom column and conditional column, those I will do a separate session on, but it's another more advanced way to do columns, especially if you want a conditional column. Like if you click that, it gives you a graphical user interface to do if statements, which is kind of cool. You can say like, if this value is within a certain range, then give me this, otherwise do this. Just like if statements in Excel, mais ça va donner une autre façon très facile de le faire. So if I click on it, I won't actually do an example, I'll do that in another video. But instead of writing the if formula, you actually get Power BI doing it for you, and you can just type in exactly what you expect to see. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. You can see that there are all kinds of transformation options in Power BI. Donc, si vos données sont dans un format qui n'est pas idéal et vous voulez changer quelque chose, Power BI vous donne beaucoup de façons de changer vos données, to clean up your data. So a lot of people ask, well, a lot of the stuff you're doing, it's the same as Excel. Yes and no. To do a lot of what I was doing here in Excel, you'd have to do at least one formula per action. And the other big thing is if you're doing this in Excel, if you want it repeated over and over, like every time you open the file, if the file's refreshed and you want to refresh or redo the same steps, unless you know VB, you got to do the same thing over and over. In Power BI, you do all of this once and it's documented, and then once it's done, all the steps you do, you just basically close out of the query editor here, and then it applies your changes, and then next time if your data is updated, all you have to do is click refresh, and it'll go to the data source, pick it up, and it'll apply the exact same actions that you applied. So you don't need to know VBA, you don't need to fiddle with macro recorders. In Excel, it documents what you do, so it's very straightforward. And especially if you have data coming from multiple sources, it's infinitely easier and better than doing it in Excel. So those are the data transformation options you'll find in Power BI. We'll do a few more videos on some of the more advanced functions later. But I mean, if you take away anything from this video, I'd like you to go home and watch some great movies by our friend Nick Nolte here. But yes, also lots of great transformation options in Power BI, and I hope you get some use out of them.